I'm starting to notice you are speaking. I'm not in a hurry when it comes to your spirit, when it comes to your presence, when it comes to your voice. I'm learning to listen, just to rest in your nearness. I'm starting to notice you are speaking. Open my eyes, I wanna see you. Open my ears, I wanna hear you speak. Tell me your thoughts, what's on your mind.
Mine, mine. Whose phone is ringing? Mine, it's mine.
Your friend, I wanna see through your eyes. I wanna see through your eyes.
Is that a go? Yeah? Okay. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Communitas this morning. It's very, very happy to see so many faces that I already know, so it's really good. It feels like already being home. I just wanted to, maybe just say thank you that you showed up this morning, whether, despite the snow out there or morning sleep for me, for example. I'm still a little bit sleepy, so, if I start gibberish, you just know whom to blame. But, since there are still some more people coming in, please, feel free to take a seat. And at the same time, there's some tea and coffee over there at the corner, so please do that and, load up on whatever you feel that you need this morning. I will be disappointing Mark a little bit because what I'm about to share is not related to what he will share later on, although he did share the topic with me. But I've been having this in my heart all week, so I didn't want to change it last minute. But if you don't know, I come from the lovely country of Albania. So we flew home for the holidays to be with family. And although I really, really loved my time there, and it was like spring, plus 17 degrees and all that, it was great, I kept looking forward to coming back, mostly because now at home I feel a bit in between worlds, like I don't really belong there anymore. But mostly because I really like the comfort of my apartment and, just doing things my way, not the way my mother or my mother-in-law likes. So it's really good to be back. But on the flight to Riga, I was actually sort of journaling on my phone, and I was thinking, or I was feeling that the word for this year is gratitude. So I started listing all the things I'm grateful for, and one of them, having a warm home. Now I'm emphasizing this because, one, I'm always cold and I hate Latvian winter. And secondly, because to my surprise, when we came to Riga, our radiators had frozen. So we had no heat until yesterday, so it was a very cold week, to say the least. And the first night that we arrived, it was minus 27 outside, and we slept in a very cold home, and, with our heads under the blankets, and the moment that I would take my nose up, I could feel that, it started freezing, and it was really bad. So through this week, I did what I do best. I complained. Starting with, my husband, and then to the landlord, and then to my family, and now to you guys telling this. But amid this, I actually tried to remind myself of what I was scribbling during my flight about gratitude and about, So I kept asking myself, and maybe God as well, what happens when we have to face the reality of our lives? Is there a place in that for gratitude? Right? It was very good to be grateful for my warm home before I actually arrived to it, but now, what can I be grateful for? And I know mine is just a small inconvenience compared to what actually people go through nowadays in the world. But the fact that it disrupted the whole week that I had anticipated coming back, it sort of helped me come to this realization, that the more we have to face reality the way it is, the more we have to try to find the goodness of God in the life we have, not in the life we wished we had, or the life we think we deserve we had. So finding the goodness of God in the actual day I had was difficult, to be honest, but it was also very, it gave me a new perspective, and I can tell you I have never been more thankful for central heating, and also, for just having a roof over my head now that it's really cold. But the bottom line is that I knew God is with me, and He's at work, and He's oh so good. So what I had to do is just practice, patience and gratitude in the process of this. So with that in mind, I would like to invite you to just stand up so we can focus on God and thank Him for His goodness despite the circumstances.
is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest friend, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak and made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is the Lord, Lord of when darkness seems to hide His face, I rest on His unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. My anchor holds within the veil. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak and made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is the Lord, Lord of Christ alone, Christ alone, cornerstone, weak and made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is the Lord, Lord of Christ alone, cornerstone, weak and made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is the Lord, Lord of He shall come with trumpet sound. Oh, may I then in Him be found. Oh, yeah. Dressed in His righteousness alone, faultless stand before the throne.
Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but He brought me in. Oh, His love for me. Oh, His love for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last, He has ransomed me. His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, He died for me. Who the Son sets free,
Thank you. You can have a seat. Could someone turn on the light again? Redona liked the darkness, so we had darkness there. But thanks for being here again. Thanks for singing along with, sometimes it's harder to sing along when it's recorded music, but I'm glad you're willing to lift your voices and engage in that way. And thanks for being here in spite of the weather. Some of you, are from Northern Europe and you can handle this. Others of you might be struggling, but I appreciate you coming out. This would be, some of you probably want to just hibernate till March or April, but I'm glad you're here. I was thinking maybe we should have a pajama and blanket Sunday, where everyone comes in their pajamas. I know some of you would wear pajamas all the time. Some of you, I'd rather not see you in your pajamas, I think. But in any case, I'm glad you're here. I think the weather today is supposed to get a little bit warmer, but that probably isn't going to mean it's going to feel nicer. But anyway, thanks for being here. Just a couple of announcements. Again, number one, like I said last week, pretty soon we're going to try to get Sunday school cranked up. And for that, we're going to need people to volunteer occasionally on Sunday to help with that. You wouldn't have to do it often. Hopefully, if there's enough people who are willing to sign up, no one has to do it more than once a month or once every 2 months. Or maybe if you're interested in helping, but you're not sure what to do, you can maybe sit in when someone else sort of leads. But it's a pretty simple system that we have. But so stay tuned for that, for maybe signing up to lead occasionally Sunday school. And then the other thing is, sometime soon, hopefully in February, we're going to have a baptism service, and at least 3 people right now are planning to be baptized. If there are some others who are interested, please let me know. The more that are there, the more of a celebration it is, and so that'd be great if you wanted to join that. Okay, so those are 2 things that are coming up soon, so keep your ears open to announcements. Basman, did you want to say something about women's thing or not? Okay, so all right, feel free to load up on hot drinks or something to eat at any time that you want to. What I want to think about this morning is first this question about what do you see? When you see things, what do you see? And sometimes people say seeing is believing, but that's generally not the truth. We might think we see something, but as often as not, what we think we see is not really what's there, especially when we look at other people. I want us to ask ourselves the question, what do we see? I mean, just look across the room at the different people here. What do you see when you see them? What do you see? Okay, and then when you leave this building and you're like walking home and you're passing people on the street and there's people there, what do you see? If you go to like the Origo and the train station, there's a lot of different kinds of people hang out there. If you're at the train station like at 10 o'clock at night, it's really interesting people. And then the question is, when you see people there, what do you see? When you see like a gathering of people who are, they maybe look like they're in 60s and 70s, or maybe 40s and 50s, and they don't have a home, and they probably for many years have dealt with various addictions, and they're there and sometimes loud. What do you see when you see them? When you see policemen, what do you see? When you see government officials, when you go to get your residence permit renewed, what do you see? When you look at your professors, what do you see? Because we see a lot of different things, and this is a pretty simple one of these kind of optical illusions where you can see different things. And in this case, this is pretty simple, and you can probably easily see the different things you can see here. Okay. But one of the things I've often talked about is we come from many different cultures, and all of us are born with, in a sense, a pair of colored glasses on. And our culture tells us how to see people. Our culture puts people into categories for us. And our families do that. And so when we see people, we don't necessarily see an individual with a name and a story, with a possible future. What we see is that whatever way that we categorize that person. And we can ask this question, what do you see when you see yourself? When you look at yourself in the mirror, what do you see? How do you see yourself? And you might think you know yourself, better than anyone else knows you. In one sense, that's true, but it's also probably true that you don't really know yourself, because probably you don't really see yourself as you really are. And I'm not necessarily saying you think more highly of yourself than you are. But I personally think that a lot of people struggle more with seeing themselves more lowly than they are. And you judge yourself by the way that other people judge you. You see yourself, like your parents see you. I mean, Radona mentioned, she kind of likes her freedom from not having to do things her mom's way or mother-in-law's way. There's a freedom from that because, of course, your parents see you a certain way. They remember when you were a snotty kid who were very unhelpful and that kind of thing. And you might grow up with that burden of expectations that you don't feel like you measure up to. And so when you see yourself possibly as a disappointment, as someone who doesn't quite measure up, as an okay person maybe, but not that important of a person. So what do you see? Because again, what we think we see might not be reality. And one of the reasons theology is important, okay, even though like many of you might think theology is not important, just experience it or whatever. Theology is important because theology teaches us to see better. It teaches us to see the truth, to not see with what our eyes see, but to see what's really going on behind the scenes or underneath the skin. So I just want us to think about who people really are, who you really are, and who everyone else in this room really is, and all those other people, who they are. And so I want to go back to this message. We've looked at it a few times as we've been going through 1 Corinthians, and this will probably be the last sort of official sermon from 1 Corinthians, and a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be a repeat, and pretty soon we're going to start looking at the book of Genesis, and maybe the next week or two will kind of prepare the way for looking at Genesis. And I hope you'll be reading Genesis, and I hope you'll be looking forward, because I think it'll be a really interesting series and actually useful to you. But as you recall, in 1 Corinthians 3, Paul said, "Don't you know that you are a temple of God, and the Spirit of God dwells in you? If anyone defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him. For the temple of God is holy, and that's the temple that you are." In the first few chapters of 1 Corinthians, Paul is dealing with kind of divisions in the church, and there's a lot of spiritual pride, and some people thinking they are more exalted or better than others, and then that means some people are made to feel bad, and it's splitting the church, and it's harming the church. And of all the kind of sins that grieve Paul's heart, or that create a reaction in Paul's mind, it's not some of the ones we often think as the really bad sins, but it's this here, when we don't regard the body of Christ, which is the temple of God. And here when Paul says you are the temple, the word you is plural, and he's talking about the body as a group. Okay, and the Spirit of God lives in that group, that dysfunctional group of people in Corinth. It's actually a temple of God. And that means it's important to God, it's special to God, and that means we've got to be very, very careful in how we relate to one another, okay, and how we relate to the body, and how we talk about the body, and whether or not we build up the body, or whether or not things that we do actually divide the body. Because you're a temple. You're a temple of God, and you're holy. Then the other place Paul talks about it, now he's kind of using the same image, but he's not focusing on the group as a temple, but even the individual body of believers is a temple. So he says again, don't you know this? Don't you have your theology straight? Is what Paul is saying. Think truth. Again, don't think about what you see. Think about what's actually true. Don't you know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who's in you? And you've received that from God. You're not your own. You've been bought with a price, Paul says. You're a temple. And what you do with yourself and what you do with your body is important. Because God has chosen to send His Spirit to live in you. You've got to have value. You have to have value because the Spirit of God lives in you. God has assigned value to you. And when you look in the mirror, it doesn't matter what anyone else actually thinks about you. God has already assigned value to you in what God sees as a temple. You see yourself, and you see your weaknesses and blemishes, and you know, when I look in the mirror, I don't more than I have to. There's lots of changes I would love to make. Because, you know, this is what I see. I see this in the mirror, but there's something more to me than just what I see. So when we're talking about what a temple is, there are two words that I use to talk a little bit about the significance of the church and the believer being a temple of God. And I talked some about how two things that a temple does is it connects and it communicates. Okay, and so the Jerusalem temple was a place where people could connect with God. Of course, back then they knew that God didn't literally need a building to live in. They understood back then that God inhabits the universe. But the temple was a great idea because it was a place where people could come and experience the connection with God. They could make those physical steps and move their body there, and they could connect with God. It was a place to meet God, and it was a gift from God to humanity to provide a place where they could more easily meet with Him. It's a place to connect. Okay? And even pagan temples, that's kind of their purpose. It's a place where you're supposed to be able to connect with whatever God is there. It's meant as a place of connection, but it also communicates. Okay, and the architecture of temples communicate things. The architecture of the temple in Jerusalem, even the dimensions communicated something. And how many walls there were communicated something, and there were steps you had to take, and all of that communicated something about the God who lived there and what His values were. And a Jerusalem temple, even the decorations had a meaning, had a purpose. There were, the carvings and that kind of thing, all were kind of images of the garden. It was meant to remind people of the Garden of Eden, the place where God and humans, before sin entered the world, could walk together. And the temple symbolized what God had in mind in the Garden of Eden. It communicated something about the greatness of God and the mercy of God and the possibility of connecting with God. Okay, so again, that's all repetition. Okay, but it does tell us something about who we are. You should be a place where people can connect with God. Okay, most of your friends are not going to come here on Sunday morning, especially in this weather. Okay, this is what's so brilliant with what God is doing now with you being a temple. God has sent His temples out there. Okay, and so wherever you go tomorrow, you're bringing a temple there, and you are a place for people to connect with God. That's how important you are. You're that. You're the connection with God that people have. You're it. There's no physical temple anymore. It's you. And you communicate something about God through the choices that you make, and everything that you do communicates something. So a temple, whether a building or people, are places to connect with God and to communicate something about God. Today I want to add two words to this image of a temple. Okay, because Another thing that the idea of the temple, the image of the temple does is it communicates purpose. In fact, communicating is part of that temple. The tabernacle, then the temple, was given with a purpose. Okay, it had a purpose. It was a tool, a means, for God to accomplish His purposes in the world. It was a special building. It wasn't like other buildings. It was built out of the same kind of stones as every other building. Okay, the physical part of the building was the same as every other building, but it was different because it had a purpose. Okay, and the objects in the temple had a purpose. They would look like any other object often, but they were different because their purpose was different. And then the other thing that the temple image tells us something about is value. Obviously, the Jerusalem temple had huge value. And I talked about this before. It still does for Jewish people in Jerusalem. All that's left of Herod's temple is that one last wall. And people will die for that little piece of property. People will die for that because it still has value. It's not even a temple anymore. God hasn't lived there for 2,000 years, you might say, and yet it still has value. People go there and they touch it and they pray there because it's got value. You're a temple. You have purpose and you have value. This is how God sees you. This is what God assigns to you. Paul says several times in 1 Corinthians about the temple being holy, or the Holy Spirit living in you. And I want to talk a little bit about that word holy, because it can be easy to lose some of the dimensions of what holiness is, and it becomes one of those very churchy religious words or spiritual words that we use maybe without even thinking about it. Kind of the core meaning for holy is the idea to be set apart or to be different. And so God is holy in the sense that He is utterly different. He is completely unique. There's no one like God. He can't be compared to anyone. He is holy. He is set apart. He's set apart from any other kind of God. He's set apart from creation. He's set apart from humanity. He's unique. He is holy. Okay, and so especially when we think about holiness in reference to God, we're thinking about His complete uniqueness. There's no one else in that category. The Greeks had many gods, but in the Bible there's one God, and no one else is in that category. And there's, in a sense, a huge metaphysical divide between God and everyone else. He is set apart. But of course, we can be holy, and so in what sense are people or things holy? And here it's important to kind of understand the multi-dimensional, meaning of holiness. Part of what it means for us to be holy is that we are set apart to God. Okay, the temple is holy in that it is set apart to God. Okay, it's a building with a particular purpose, and the objects have a particular purpose. The objects are holy because of their purpose, not, they're made out of the same things. And someone could take a lump of clay and make two pots and take one pot home and put another pot in the temple, and they're made of the same thing and made by the same hands, but they are now different because one has a different purpose, and it is now holy because it has this purpose. It's set apart to God. And if we're set apart to God, another dimension of holiness then means to be set apart from. If we are set apart to God, who is utterly different, then that means we need to be different. There needs to be something about us that is different. Our lifestyle needs to be holy. We can't just live like everyone else lives. Okay, and there's different kind of aspects of that. Paul talks about, sexual morality is a sign of holiness, and there's lots of ways in which our behavior needs to not reflect the behavior of those around us, because we are holy and we are set apart from certain kinds of behaviors. You know, what you might used to do that was normal maybe can no longer be the norm, because you are holy and you need to be set apart, okay, from just kind of the normal mass of humanity. Now, those aspects of holiness is what I think most people think of as holiness, or even in simpler terms, you know, the less you sin, the more holy you are, you know, or the more you go to church, the more holy you are, or the more you do religious things, the more holy you are. Okay, but that's not quite everything that the word holiness is, because holiness also means to be set apart for a purpose. Okay, and to be set apart from, often in the church, people have, you know, pictured that as, you know, our direction is we need to walk away from the world. The world is sinful, the world is unholy, and if I'm going to be holy, okay, then I've got to be set apart from, and I've got to walk away from the world, and that's what is required to be holy. To like build a big wall between us and the world, and the more separated I am from the world, the more holy I am. Except that totally leaves out to be set apart for. Because God has purposes in the world. That world out there is not just unholy, but it's also an object of God's love. And if that unholy world is going to connect with God, then your body, which is a temple, has to connect with those people. And so our direction actually has to be into the world. That's how Jesus was holy. I mean, the word holy is used of Jesus. How could Jesus be holy? He was always sinless. He was the Son of God. How was he holy? He was holy because he left the holy space of heaven and he became human and walked on this earth. He was set apart for God's purposes, and God's purposes were in the world. And so the direction of walking away from the world is actually unholy. It's actually unholy. Okay. Holiness is moving into the world. Yes, being different. We're not going to do any good to the world if we're just like the world, but we have to be in proximity to the world. The world has to have access to the temple because the temple is holy. It has a purpose, and if you're a temple, you have a purpose, and you've got to consider what that purpose is. And by the way, your primary purpose is not to come to church on Sunday. Please come to church on Sunday, please. You know, it really helps me, and I hope it helps you. Okay, but your purpose is in the world, and I hope one of the main purposes of this church is that we can help you to live in the world. Okay, this is why we don't have a lot of activities. Okay, because the more you're in church activities, the less you're in the world. Some activities are good and we have activities, but this is what holiness means, and this is what it means to be a temple. It means we have a purpose, and that purpose is in the world. But then also, being a temple speaks about value, and this is kind of the main point I want to make today, and maybe a new image to this temple that we haven't talked about so much. And recognizing people as being a temple, people as being someone that God has an investment in, should help us to see them better. So that's why, again, I asked this question: what do you see? I mean, in this room, when you look at other people, what do you see? Did you have the thought, oh, that's a temple of God? I mean, has it occurred to anyone this morning when you looked at someone to think, you've got the Spirit? You actually have the Spirit of God. You have the Spirit of God. I mean, what if that was our first thought when we saw people? Not just the flesh and blood. We're saying, I am who you say I am. And you are who God says you are. And that's what we need to learn to see. Now, one of the reasons that that's hard is a verse that we looked at last week. Paul says, we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power, it's from God and not from us. Previous to this, in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, Paul has used the word glory. This treasure is the glory of God. That's a term that's used for the temple. In the Old Testament, when the temple was built, the glory of God came down. It was just stone, and it became a temple when the glory of God came. And Paul says this treasure comes to us who are just jars of clay. We're going to be looking at the creation story, and you might remember the creation story. One of the ways, truth is communicated is God forms us from the dust of the earth. Just like kind of the rest of creation. The same way animals were formed. In a sense, physically, we've got a lot of relationship with the animals. Did you know that you share a lot of DNA with pigs? That's kind of a little bit sobering and humbling. We have this treasure in jars of clay. And this is what makes it hard, for us to see people differently, because what we do see is the clay. You're just the unpainted pot. And by the way, you've got a lot of cracks. And this is what it's easy to see. Okay, because the form is a jar of clay. But what's inside makes it all together different. And so my question is, if people are holy ground, then how are we going to treat them? If we really saw people as being holy, how will we interact with them? How will we treat them? How will we see them? How will we speak to them? How will we speak of them? If people are actually holy ground. In the Old Testament, of course, you might remember the story of Moses in the burning bush, and he had that experience of God, and he had to take his shoes off as a sign of he's on holy ground, and he took his shoes off. And this is something that happens in a lot of temples. This is from a number of years ago. I made a trip to Myanmar. This is probably on my way there in Kuala Lumpur, and as a tourist, I visited several different kinds of temples, Buddhist and Hindu temples, just because it's interesting. And all of them, you take your shoes off, and there's this mass of shoes there that you have to take off. And I mentioned in Yangon in Myanmar, there's the Shwedagon Pagoda. It's an amazing place if you can ever safely get there, But of course, man, it's hot. And it's this like marble floor, and you take your shoes off and your feet are like burning. But you do this, and so when I was there, I was taking my shoes off too and leaving my shoes outside and desperately hoping, my pair of shoes were going to be there and I wouldn't have to, steal one of these other pair of shoes. Okay, but this is what you do. You take your shoes off, and even in the Christian churches there, I've mentioned that when you go up on the platform to preach, you take your shoes off. Okay, because that's a sign of something. And, in Latvian homes you do this. Most Latvian homes, you take your shoes off. In this case, not because it's, a temple or necessarily holy ground, but it's a sign of respect. Okay, you don't want to drag dirt into someone's house. When you leave today, just notice everything that you dragged in. The floor downstairs is going to be pretty nasty, actually. That's just the way it is, and that's why in homes here and in a lot of places you take your shoes off as respect. You're going to leave behind, some dirt, so you don't bring that dirt into someone's presence. I was talking about this in one of the lectures I was giving, here at LBC, and I was using that temple image. I used that picture of some of you that I used before as a temple, and so, I introduced some of you to the students. And one of the guys just really, he got it, and he mentioned that about taking shoes off when you go in a room. And what if when we were going to meet anyone or have a conversation, we mentally took our shoes off? What kind of dirt do I need to leave behind? What do I need to take off so that I can see this person as he or she really is? What kind of dirt might exist previously in our relationship that I need to just mentally take off so that I can relate to this person as this person really is, not according to what I see or according to how we have interacted in the past. But according to the truth. See them the way God sees them. What if we prepared ourselves to interact with people? I wonder, I've got to think this through myself. When you come on Sunday morning, how do you prepare yourself, or do you prepare yourself? And I'm often conscious of the details that need to be done. The table's got to be prepared this morning. I had a panic attack because I didn't bring a wine bottle opener and we didn't have a way to open it. And, I thought, am I smart enough to improvise and open that thing? And I get consumed with that kind of thing. And it's easy for me to not even think about the people who are coming. Okay, what if I prepared myself a little bit differently? Or if I prepared myself just mainly to see you and interact with you? And what if you did that? You prepared yourself not just to listen to the sermon. I hope you prepared yourself to listen to the sermon. It'll probably make it more effective if you do that. But if you mainly prepared yourself to interact with people, you in Sunday morning you just gave yourself this mental message about, I'm going to see people. I'm going to talk to them, and they're a temple. The Holy Spirit lives in them. They have value. They have value. And so that's why I'm going to talk to them as people who have value. You don't have to see the value. Seeing is not believing. Believing is seeing. Believe what God thinks about people. And then act that way. And maybe eventually you will begin to see it. One of the reasons I'm talking about this now, one reason is I said last week, for some reason that temple image has just kind of captivated me. And I just want to kind of keep trying to figure it out and work through it. But another reason I wanted to talk about that this week and last week is that there's a lot of connections to actually the creation story in the Genesis series we're coming up to. And we're going to see, for instance, in a few weeks that creation was created as a temple, especially the Garden of Eden. It wasn't just a cosmos. It was meant to be a temple. You know how Adam and Eve were meant to walk with God in the garden because the garden was meant to be a temple. Okay, and there's a lot of temple and creation imagery that comes together. Creation was functioning as a temple. And we're going to see that the word blessing fills Genesis 1 and 2. The story starts with blessing, and it's all about blessing. The story is about blessing. The story of the Bible is about blessing. It's about blessing. That's the story of the Bible from chapter 1 to the last chapter. And then chapter 1 of Genesis talks about the imago Dei, the image of God, and the valued special place that humans have. Humans are in God's image. This is what makes humans different from the rest of creation. We're not just animals. Physiologically, we're just animals, but we're not just animals. Because God is in us and invested in us in a way He's not in the rest of creation. And as the image of God, we reflect Him and we partner with Him. The humans had incredibly high value in Genesis 1 and 2. And some people might not like that idea of partnering with God. Does God need someone to partner with them? No, He doesn't need. It's amazing grace that He lets us partner with what He's doing. It's just amazing what God had in mind at the beginning of the story. But of course, we're going to have to come to chapter 3 where sin, disobedience enters the picture, and rejection. Mainly here, I mean humans' rejection of God and His way. It will sometimes seem like maybe God has also rejected people. Might seem that way, but it's not true. God never rejected His plan. He never rejected the image of God that He put in to people. But the story does take a downward turn there, and at its lowest point, when the perfect ultimate image of God becomes human, what we did is kill Him. That's what we did. The lowest part of the story, when humanity showed just how miserable it is. But that low point of the story was not the end point of the story. And so when we come to the verses that we're looking at now, this is Paul's way of saying God is still doing what He was going to do here. For Paul, when he talks about the image of God, he usually uses that phrase for Jesus because He's kind of the image of God in perfection. Paul's way of communicating that same message of value and purpose is to say, you are a temple. This is how important you are. In spite of what sin did, the story goes on. And what God started to do, He's still doing. What He's always done, He's always had people who are set apart to Him, who are partnering with Him and advancing His purposes in the world. And this tells us something about our value. And of course, the temple image is mainly used for people who are consciously followers of Jesus, Christians, so to speak. But this image of God, that's not just for Christians. Every human is in the image of God. Every human is in the image of God. God is invested in every human. Every human being has intrinsic value because of God, because God gives them value. They have value. Go down to the train station again and walk around and see people and just tell yourself, that person has value. That person has probably crapped up their lives with multiple bad decisions. That person has value because when God sees them, God sees the image of God in them. He doesn't just see their bad choices. He sees Himself in them and He cares about them. He's graciously given His image to them. So this is the story, and we're going to just constantly see this story borne out through the Bible. And Paul's image of the temple of God is just part of the story and part of his way of saying the story goes on and it's good news. The blessing that was possible here, it's still possible for us now. In a few minutes, we're going to have the Lord's Supper together, but I want us to listen to another song. This one isn't, again, for singing, but I just want us to pay attention to the words, and this will kind of prepare us for celebrating communion together. It's by the same guy that I played last week, okay? So I don't know if you liked him or not, but I find his words meaningful, and I think you'll really like these words. So just, meditate on the words as they come up on the screen.
Wayward winds in a world of trouble and sin. Walk along a crooked mile behind a million ranking fire. Forgot where I came from, somewhere back when I was young. I was a good man's child. I lost some nameless things, my innocence flew away from this shit. Had to hide a face from my desire to embrace forbidden fire.